Hey there, friends. I want to go back to curriculum and discuss what I would consider a deep dive into racism, which I don't think we can separate from A, social Darwinism, and B, eugenics. We need to resurrect only to study, not to re implement the eugenicist agenda. We need to study it. I was back in the Birmingham Museum of Civil Rights in a recent YouTube, like two or three ago. I recommend that as a prequel. When I put these in my blogs, I'll put this one and that one together. So I'm writing to a physics teacher here who will remain nameless. And the question was, is it right to talk about energy slaves, which was a good thing in the 1940s? Fortune magazine, Bucky Fuller, it was the realization that automation does not have to mean lower living standards. Automation can mean freedom from drudgery. And this is the way we need to continue to look at automation, given that robots and driverless everything and cyber everything, cybernetics kind of died as a discipline for some reason, but the cybernetic aspects of life are still there. They connect to epiphenomenalism in philosophy, if you know what that is. So I'm telling this physics teacher, hey, I don't think it's your problem to study racism, and if energy slaves is objectionable in a physics context, I totally get that. Like, I wouldn't start a new physics textbook today necessarily talking about energy slaves, but it is a meme back in the day in the 1940s, and it's also a signal that we need to continue studying what is slavery, because Alfred North Whitehead, in his books, indicates that civilization is the progress away from slavery. And if you have to do what people tell you and they've got everything locked up, basically, like if you're undocumented and they put you in a holding pen and say you have no rights, which is what they're being told, it's like you're nothing, you're undocumented, you're not a citizen. Never mind, you're an American, literally. Americans are imprisoning Americans for no other reason than they don't have the right documents. And my question is, how can we issue the documents? Like, how about the UN gives you a little plastic laminated card with your human rights on it? I know, nobody pays attention, right? The US never ratified it, right? Still, as a human being, aren't there some minimum standards? And we're kind of bad about saying that there are or setting any, right? We're very slow to have that conversation. So I talk about nomenclature in this essay, and really what I want to get to is, for one thing, I don't speak for Haverford or Swarthmore, in that I'm hoping that this is a curriculum that they would follow, but I'm not like reading the syllabi or sending people in to check who's reading what where at this point. But I'm saying if you want to understand your culture, you need to know about social Darwinism, and you need to understand how it fed the eugenics movement and how that fed the Nazis. And you need to read War Against the Weak by Edwin Black to get that whole story. There's so much in that book. It is so pregnant with information. And then I've been reviewing Triumph of the Will, which is reviewing in the sense of watching. I think I'll do a little bit of editing of this story here. Let's see, how do I edit? Edit story. What I want to do is take Triumph of the Will and take the quotes off and just make it italics, right? So we're talking about a Nazi propaganda film. It's not extremely violent. It's not talking about the blood and guts of war. It's trying to make actually everything seem very peaceful, very middle class. We get enough sausage, everything's cool. We're having fun in the army. It's really everything's awesome. It's kind of like that Lego movie. Everything is awesome. So I just wanted to say where I would go in the humanities and keep Fuller in the picture. I would go into War Against the Weak by Edwin Black, study eugenics as an ideology, not as a science really, although it inherits from animal husbandry and culling the herd and all this stuff, forcible sterilization. Still goes on to this day. I think you should take some time to do some deep diving into all these things. But who has the time, right? See, I would pay people to just catch up on what's been going on. Like, let's just let people sit and watch YouTubes and we'll feed them, right? You won't die from watching YouTubes. And we'll catch you up, right? It won't be just random YouTubes. And you watch one, you get a meal ticket. You watch another one, you get another meal ticket. I know that sounds like Skinnerism or something, but I'm saying that's education. Reward people with life support as they program themselves, self-brainwash, you could say, to become who they want to be, right? We give you choices. Who do you want to be in your next cycle or life, right? I'm not talking about afterlife. So read all that, and then Fuller comes in through the Pound era, and Pound comes in through the Pound era. And this is a lot of my videos, not a lot of, but some of my videos focus on, where Pound came down on the wrong side in the war and where he got put into a mental hospital as the better of two evils because they were thinking about shooting him, and how he went back to Italy eventually, and how Bucky Fuller visited him there and cheered him up. And tying these threads together is going to help. Now, Wittgenstein, as I've been talking about also in my recent postings or narrations, is going to be an interesting source as well. And I'm not saying hide away from these sort of outlandish allegations in the Jew of Linz. I'm saying even if this is not really true, and it's hard to establish truth in these kind of things, it's still going to help because it connects dots, it glues things together, and we don't have to necessarily agree when we read something. So I don't look at this book and say, oh, I agree with everything, and therefore we should read it. It's like, no, I don't think I agree with a lot of this maybe, but let's read it anyway, right? Here's another one to read. Don't shy away from the Kennedy assassination. Why? Because you'll get Fletcher Prouty, a great author, I think, and he cites Bucky Fuller. I feel like these are, I don't want to say Illuminati because that has a horrible reputation these days, but these are enlightened people who these are what we call est people in the science fiction movie or in the science fiction story. I'll have to look that up, but they're evolved, right? And I think we need to expose ourselves to these authors. Lastly, here's another one, Synergetic Stew. This one somewhat freaked me out. I mean, it was a Bucky birthday, and everyone contributed their favorite recipes, but there was something cannibalistic about it. It kind of freaked me out. It was like we're going to be sort of, I don't know, eating Princeton Club of Oregon. You never know what you're going to find in your different books. Anyway, interesting title. I haven't cooked any of these recipes mainly, but it's still an interesting title. So definitely we don't avoid is the key point I'm trying to make in all of this is that the best way to study what hurts, the best way to heal what hurts is to really look into it in some depth. Really go back and dig it up and study it and don't avoid it. And I think the Birmingham Civil Rights Museum has completely the right approach in this regard. And when it comes to the Nazis and World War II, as you might know from watching my videos, I encourage Human Smoke, the book. I encourage this War Against the Weak the book. Documentaries that go with either of these would be really good. And then more obscurely, I'm a big fan of the H.G. Wells reportage coming from around the 1920s, between the wars. I think it was 22 New York City, and he's hopeful, but at the same time, he sees how this could all go bad, and he was prescient in that regard. I really want us to have these great thinkers at our side as we go forward. We should not feel alone in our battle to keep our heads above water and keep our civilization from sinking back into slavery, which is the opposite of civilization, according to Alfred North Whitehead. I need to get your citations for that, but I read it clearly when I was at Earlham College. I was reading that civilization is the opposite of slavery. So let's work on that. Let's ask ourselves, what is slavery in this day and age? Let's not say, oh, well, that's a thing of the past. It's all gone. We don't have it anymore. That's the wrong approach. It's like, what is slavery? How does slavery manifest today, including in places where it's quote unquote illegal? Let's focus on forced labor in prisons, for example. The 13th Amendment, all this kind of stuff, that's a wonderful discussion. There's documentaries, there's something to talk about there. Let's ask ourselves, what is slavery? Do we have it today? And where is our vector away from slavery? And what role does automation play in that? Talk about lifestyles, talk about freedom. I'm all for it. All right? Talk to you soon.